West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Well, we finally got to hear from Donald Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. On Friday, you might remember, he spoke to the January 6th committee behind closed doors for hours, met with them on Capitol Hill. And then at yesterday's hearing, the committee revealed several clips of his videotaped interview. We're going to play you some of that shortly. Now, Cipollone's testimony, as far as we can tell, conformed with the broader picture that we've now gathered from many, many witnesses. That Donald Trump was dead set on staying in office against the will of the American people by any means necessary. And Cipollone was among those in Trump's orbit who resisted those efforts in the final days of Trump's term in office. Now, to state the obvious, it's a very good thing that people like Pat Cipollone and Bill Barr and others around Donald Trump resisted his attempted coup. But part of the story they're telling about how the insurrection came to be is, I think, wildly misleading and actually, I have to say, kind of enraging. Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney clearly feels the same way.
Now the argument seems to be that President Trump was manipulated by others outside the administration, that he was persuaded to ignore his closest advisors, and that he was incapable of telling right from wrong. The strategy is to blame people his advisors called, quote, the crazies, for what Donald Trump did. This, of course, is nonsense. President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices.
Now, Liz Cheney said that for a reason. She recognized, I think, a common theme in the testimony from Trump insiders who have submitted to the lawful subpoenas of this committee. Many of them have clearly been attempting to salvage their own reputations and to kind of exonerate themselves from their complicity in the most severe frontal attack on American democracy since the Civil War. And they've been doing that by basically blaming the whole thing on a group of so-called, as she said, crazies. As Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien put it, there was Team Normal, including himself and people like Pat Cipollone and Attorney General Bill Barr. And then there was Team Not Normal, made up of people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn and the Overstock guy, the pro-coup forces. We heard the same derision from Pat Cipollone yesterday when he described the ragtag group of coup plotters who made their way into the White House for an unscheduled meeting in the residence in December of 2020.
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office. Well, again, I don't think they were providing. Well, first of all, the Overstock person, I've never known who this guy was. Actually, the first thing I did, I walked in, I looked at him, and I said, "Who are you?" and he told me. I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice.
Cipollone was equally scornful about the pro-coup team's plan to have the federal government seize voting machines.
It's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States. There's no legal authority to do that. And there is a way to contest elections, that happens all the time. But the idea that the federal government could come in and seize election machines, I don't understand why I would even have to tell you why that's a bad idea. It's a terrible idea.
Cipollone also told the committee the group had no evidence to support their claims of fraud and basically did not believe in facts.
What response did you get when you asked Ms. Powell and her colleagues where's the...
A variety of responses based on my current recollection, including, can't believe you would say something, things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know, and things like that, or, a disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up what you say with facts.
Oh, really? A disregard for backing up things you say with facts? That was the point. I almost threw something at the TV. Pat, buddy, bro, my man, do you know who you worked for? Do you realize who employed you? The guy, the boss, the big guy? Donald Trump. You worked for Donald Trump. The most serial liar to ever occupy the Oval Office. The most pathological liar I've ever covered in 20 years of journalism. And the people assembled in that room with him on December 18th were there because he wanted to overturn American democracy and declare himself essentially president for life and keep himself in power. If you do not realize that, you are either stupid, disqualifyingly naive, or so incompetent you should never hold another job. My God. Because Donald Trump was not shy about the fact that he would never accept an election loss. He was quite public about it. He said it before he took office back in 2016.
Do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
But, sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
After he won in the Electoral College but lost the popular vote by more than 2.8 million votes, Donald Trump claimed immediately the election was rigged. Do you remember that? He tweeted, quote, "In addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote. If you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally." That sort of seems like it's a disregard for facts and using facts to back up what you say, don't you think? And just a few months into his first term, again, we all lived through this, okay? Trump launched a commission using the power of the federal government to look into his ludicrous, baseless claims of voter fraud. And of course, they found nothing because they were just generated out of thin air. But that didn't stop him from doing the exact same thing in the run-up to the 2020 election. Months before Election Day, Trump was already planning the idea that there would be widespread fraud.
We have to win the election. We can't play games. Get out and vote. Do those beautiful absentee ballots, or just make sure your vote gets counted. Make sure, because the only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election.
Okay, I want to make sure. He said that time and time again. The only way we lose is if it's rigged, right? So there's two options. Either I am elected or it's rigged. Either way, I win. That's what he set up. That's what he said time and time again. And then, once again, just as he did back in 2016, he refused to say he would accept the results if it were a defeat.
I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see. Look, Hillary Clinton asked me the same thing.
No, I asked you the same thing in the debate.
And you know what? She's the one that never accepted it.
I agree.
She never accepted her loss, and
But
she looks like
can
a
you
fool.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
So Pat Cipolloni's sitting in that room December 18th with this ragtag group of crazies, and he's like, whoa, how did I get here? This is so nuts. They don't seem to believe in facts. That's Donald Trump's position on the elections. Pretty goddamn consistent. From 2015 to 2016 to 2020, Donald Trump gets to run the country. He wins forever in every election because either he wins and gets more votes or because he doesn't and he stays in power anyway because it's rigged. It was obvious to anyone with a brain cell paying attention over the past several years. Pat. Time and time again, Trump said it out loud, publicly, on national television. And just because some people, like Pat Cipollone, who again defended the president, worked for the president, helped him get his agenda done, just because Pat Cipollone lied to himself and collaborated with this monstrous sociopath who almost ended American democracy, doesn't mean it was a hard thing to see. That does not mean it was bad advice that resulted in Donald Trump almost leading in person a fascist coup to sack the Capitol. A coup was the plan from the beginning. It was either victory or a coup. Those were the two options. Donald Trump plotted it more or less out in the open. And all the allegations of voter fraud, the ludicrous, viral conspiracy theories, the constitutional loopholes they tried to exploit, they were just pretexts for the coup. The coup was Donald Trump wins because that's what he believes Donald Trump is owed. There is something deeply enraging about watching all these supposedly serious and well-credentialed, smart, ethical people, the team normal people, the professionals, the adults in the room who did the right thing and counsel Donald Trump the right way, being so disturbed and aghast and bewildered and surprised that it turned out the way it did. That the alleged facts and the evidence were not really there. The president was trying to do something illegal with these weirdos. Of course he was. It's a good thing they realized it at the very end. But it's a bad thing it took them so darn long. The big question is if this pattern of bizarrely willful blindness to the obvious truth is right now repeating itself at the Department of Justice, where top officials were reportedly just jolted into discussing Donald Trump's conduct more openly following Cassidy Hutchinson's explosive testimony.
It is Thursday, the 14th of July of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday, on Bastille Day too. Isn't that something? Well, a little bit of Creole, a little bit of spice in your life, and I'm going to tell you, it's spicy out there. Very, very spicy. Okay, well, I mentioned yesterday on social media that in America, just so that we know what the rules are now, in America, 10-year-old pregnant rape victims are the criminals, not the Nazis passing the enabling Nazi acts, okay? All right, you enable the Nazis instead of punching them, and this is what we get. Now, the Indiana Attorney General wants to investigate the doctor who performed the abortion on, yes, that little slutty criminal. Though I should jump ahead a little bit now and let you know that since the rapist, they found the rapist, and they already had a police report. It had been referred to the cops in Ohio. And because there was so much uncertainty on the trigger law in Ohio, that's why the family took their daughter across state lines. So I'm kind of getting a little disjointed here, but the right wing went into a frenzy because apparently this was all made up by liberals to, make this authoritarian Handmaid's Tale law look bad. So apparently, this is what they believe, and I got to tell you, Yost is continuing to stand by his lie. They tried to find the little girl, and no one would give them any straight answers. Well, yeah, she's a juvenile, you freak. We already see what happens when you dox like 25-year-old senior aides for in the Trump administration who testify under oath because they've been subpoenaed. They're following the law. Jeez. So, yeah, they're going to still criminalize the little girl. But now that they found out that the rapist is, quote, an illegal alien, they can turn it around and say, oh, the Democrats want to make these rapists citizens. Well, okay, we can do a twofer here. We'll keep that guy from becoming a citizen, and we'll strip citizenship from all those Baptist ministers that have been abusing youth Baptist ministers who have been abusing kids for, quite a while in the heartland of America. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, Joe's not doing enough. Well, I got to say, he's actually done quite a bit. I would just wish it would be reported as such. No wonder his numbers tank. It's almost like it's a plan. Talk about active Russian measures, or is it Russian active measures? It's only been the tactic for how long? I mean, come on. We didn't go through the Cold War diving under desks because, it was, I don't know, to keep us positive about life. Every time we dove under a desk, a Soviet commie got its wings. I'm serious. And now they're mobsters. I just like how that works, We'll get our feet wet in capitalist society, and what's the best way to do it? With mobsters. That's right. That's for the free market for you. I like regulation. I really do. It sort of keeps people at like a handshake. Otherwise, you just get slapped in the face, if not stabbed in the back. Seems like we're getting slapped in the face and stabbed in the back at the same time. All right, I don't know where this is going, but I'm kind of pissed off about it all, aren't you? Yes, we are. So with that said, I guess we might as well just get right on into the curated part of this show. And, of course, yeah, at the top, old Team Normal. Yeah, everybody, when the ship is sinking. Look what the rats do. All right, the jumping ship. And I also have to say, when Lynn Cheney gets done with what she's doing, do you think that those steely-eyed, contemptuous behavior of that gal is going to not be turned on us? Do you think she's now going to be a Democrat? Hell no. Don't forget, she's a Cheney. And maybe, I don't know, maybe she's had a metamorphosis. Maybe she's evolved. It's possible. I doubt it. All right. Not to trumpet anything that Mel Gibson does anymore, but there's some character type cartoon scenes in, The Patriot, for instance, where, the ragtag revolutionaries have to sort of like rub elbows with the unsavory types because, they're good fighters and they can actually be counted on to do the bad stuff that needs to be done. But then when all the bad stuff that needs to be done is done, what do you do with them? Well, like I said, it was a cartoon character, and, some of them lose their families, and then they cry and, have a heart attack or something. I don't know. Salvation, I guess. But anyway, what are we going to do with the unsavory types when they're going to turn their cannons on us, huh? Well, that's for another day, because right now, the Nazis are a much more, shall we say, potent opponent. Yes, they are. Okay, well, if you're going to be a Nazi sympathizer and you think this is your meal ticket to the top, you're still a rat when you're jumping ship. All right? Thanks for your testimony, but a rat's a rat. On the rest of the menu, masks could return to Los Angeles as COVID surges nationwide. And I did some shopping yesterday in both Jackson and Josephine counties because I live right there on the border. And I wore a mask everywhere I went, and I made sure I washed my hands and I socially distanced. Okay? Because in these two counties, we are seeing hospitalizations, deaths, and next thing we're going to get is monkeypox, I bet. Because people just don't care. They think it's all some sort of liberal plot to keep them from being free. I call them Nazis, which is not really being a good neighbor. If you're a Nazi, by definition, you're a terrible neighbor. On the rest of the menu as we continue here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, 10 anti-vax players on the Kansas City Royals will not be making the trip to Toronto due to Canada's vaccine mandate. Well, good. And a former Colorado elections manager taken into custody marks the third arrest in the state on charges of tampering with voting equipment for Trump. Boy, they sure do project a lot, don't they? Yes, they do. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Pope Francis named 3 women to serve as members of the Vatican office that vets bishop nominations. Boy, the Opus Dei freaks are going to hate that. You know they are. And the European Union's executive decried the rule of law situation in Poland and Hungary in its annual report. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by the Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending in person for the first time in 2 years, by the way, Netroots Nation 22 in Pittsburgh this year. So we look forward to Kelly's reportage from Netroots Nation 22. Begins August 18th, so stay tuned for that. We will be there. If you would look across the page from the chat room link there near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, all the way to the left, there is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, say, how about an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. If you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to pool those dollars with other coffees that have been purchased, plus coffees that we have pulled out of our wallets. We pull all that together, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but representative democracy around the world. And that's no joke. I mean, we kind of make light of it, but there is an international cabal of Nazi fascists trying to destroy representative democracy, because that's what authoritarians do. They gotta just like authoritarianism all the time, and they can eliminate at the same time. It's like what they live for, and we have to stand against that because hey, due process and equal protection for all. And that's no joke. Okay, so thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many, many years ago. 11. We're over 11 years, going on 12 years now of that continuous 24/7, 365 powerhouse of resistance. All right, thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, please do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I just happened to post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get that linked up on social media, either for the broadcast or for the podcast, depending on, how busy I am. And lately it's been for only the podcast. I apologize. But the show notes and links are an important and integral part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because that's where the real reportage is. Just because we're doing the Space 33,000 kind of format, there is truth to the matter, plus the complete article too. All right? So do check out the show notes and links. You can do that by following me at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And, of course, the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library for, 11 plus years can be found at the Internet Archive, as long as these young author cabal doesn't destroy the Library of Alexandria of modern times. Don't let them do it. All righty. Oh, I wanted to make mention at the top, and I failed to, but I'm going to right now. Just a little bit of personal news as big trucks just drove away. Okay, goodbye, big truck. My mom took another tumble yesterday, this time with my sister when they went to the store, and for some reason, my mom has one of those walkers that you can sit on, but I guess she wanted my sister to pull her or push her or something. I don't know. But, they're not made for being a wheelchair. They're made for you to stand up and walk. And then if you need to rest, then you got a place to sit. But, so, I don't know. Mom took a tumble, busted up some more of her gossamer thin skin, and kind of banged her elbow, kind of bumped her head a little bit. But long story short, paramedics did arrive, bandaged her up, gave her all of the vitals, determined that, she didn't bang her head, badly or whatever. She didn't even have a lump, thankfully. But that doesn't mean anything. Jostling your brain is jostling your brain. But she didn't have any of the telltale symptoms, which we are still monitoring, by the way. And also put parameters in blue ink on her sores to make sure that she doesn't get cellulitis, because, that's to determine if she's getting cellulitis. If the infection redness goes beyond, the mark, got to get her in right away, because she has, a low immune system already, which is bothersome around here when people don't care and they don't wear masks. And I'm not shaking their hand, okay? I'm sorry. Wash your hands. That's key also. All right. So that was a little bit of personal news about Mom, and she seems to be doing okay, except she's awfully sore. Oh, this is the other thing, is that the hip replacement doctor says that she is, well enough to be able to get a hip replacement. And that would, after, going through the rehab, which is no fun, will give her a much better quality of life, because a lot of her tumbling has to do with the fact that her hip gives out and her knees give out, and there's nowhere for her to go. I mean, except down. And you can't do that. Okay. Well. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. It comes out of the Associated Press by Carla K. Johnson and Christopher Weber. Nick Berrigan is used to wearing a mask because his job in the Los Angeles film industry has long required it, so he won't be fazed if the nation's most populous county reinstates rules requiring face coverings because of another spike in coronavirus cases across the country. I feel fine about it because I've worn one pretty much constantly for the last few years. It's become a habit, said Berrigan, masked up while out running errands. Los Angeles County is home to 10 million residents and is facing a return to a broad indoor mask mandate later this month if current trends in hospital admissions continue, which is what occurred here in the last month or so, less than a month, in Jackson and Josephine counties, and Douglas as well here in Oregon. Nationwide, the latest COVID-19 surge is driven by the highly transmissible BA.5 variant, which now accounts for 65% of cases, with its cousin BA.4 contributing another 16%. The variants have shown a remarkable ability to get around the protection offered by vaccination. With the new Omicron variants again pushing hospitalizations and deaths higher in recent weeks, states and cities are rethinking their responses, and the White House is stepping up efforts to alert the public. Some experts said the warnings are too little, too late. It's well past the time when the warning should have been out there, said Dr. Eric Topol, head of the Scripps Research Transnational Institute, who has called the BA.5 variant the worst variant yet. Global trends for the two mutants have been apparent for weeks, experts said. They quickly outcompete older variants and push cases higher wherever they appear. Yet, Americans have tossed off their masks and jumped back into travel and social gatherings, and they have largely ignored booster shots, which protect against COVID-19's worst outcomes. And courts have blocked federal masks and vaccine mandates, which are then tying the hands of U.S. officials. White House COVID-19 coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha appeared on morning TV yesterday, Wednesday, urging booster shots and renewed vigilance. Though federal health officials said the need to push harder on masks indoors, early detection, and a prompt antiviral treatment are also called for. The administration's challenge, in the view of the White House, is not their messaging, but people's willingness to hear it, due to pandemic fatigue and the politicization of the virus response. For months, the White House has encouraged Americans to make use of free or cheap at-home rapid tests to detect the virus, as well as free and effective antiviral treatment Paxlovid that protects against serious illness and death. And on Tuesday, the White House response team called on all adults 50 and older to urgently get a booster if they have not yet this year, and dissuaded people from waiting for the next generation of shots that are expected in the fall, when they can roll up their sleeves and get some protection now. Requiring masks again helps us reduce that risk, Los Angeles County supervisors were told. For most of the pandemic, Los Angeles County has required masks in some indoor spaces, including healthcare facilities, metro train buses, airports, jails, and homeless shelters. The new mandate would expand the requirement to all indoor public spaces, including shared offices, manufacturing facilities, warehouses, retail stores, restaurants, and bars, along with theaters and schools. Bowman of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Kansas City Royals will be without 10 of the 26 players on their active roster for their upcoming trip to Toronto due to Canadian restrictions on travelers who are not vaccinated against COVID-19. Manager Mike Matheny said yesterday, Wednesday, the club will be without hitters Andrew Benintendi, Hunter Dozier, Cam Gallagher, Kyle Isbell, MJ Melendez, Whit Merrifield, and Michael A. Taylor, along with pitchers Dylan Coleman, Brad Keller, and Brady Singer. The team is set to play 4 games in Toronto. The 10 players will be placed on the restricted list and forfeit 4 days of pay and Major League service time in accordance with terms of the Major League Baseball's collective bargaining agreement. It's an individual choice, Matheny said. The organization's done a real good job bringing in professionals and experts to talk to guys through tough conversations and then put it in their hands to make the decisions they believe is best for them and their families. Benintendi will lose $186,813. Merrifield will lose $153,846. Keller $106,044, and Dozier and Taylor $98,901 each. Among the others, the lost pay for Gallagher will be a little short of $20,000. Singer's a little short than $16,000. Isabel is about $15,500. Coleman will be $15,399, and Melendez will be losing $15,385. The club will name their replacements today, along with an announcement about other staff who won't be traveling with the club. Colleen Slevin of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here on the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The former elections manager for a Colorado clerk indicted on charges of tampering with voting equipment has been arrested on allegations that she was part of the scheme. Sandra Brown, who worked for Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters, turned herself in on Monday in response to a warrant issued for her arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation and attempting to influence a public servant. The arrest was first reported by the Daily Sentinel newspaper. Peters and her chief deputy, Belinda Knisley, are being prosecuted for allowing a copy of a hard drive to be made during an update of election equipment in May of 2021. State election officials first became aware of a security breach last summer when a photo and video of confidential voting system passwords were posted on social media and a conservative website. Peters, who has echoed former President Donald Trump's false theories about the 2020 election and became a hero to election conspiracy theorists, lost her bid to become the GOP candidate for Colorado Secretary of State last month. She first came to national attention when she spoke last year at a conference hosted by My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell, one of the most prominent election deniers in the country. Indeed. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Think of a top executive at a powerhouse company. You're no doubt imagining someone who's confident and clever, decisive and determined. And though it pains me to say it, you're probably picturing a man. The sad thing is, you wouldn't be too far off the mark.
Around only 7% of S&P 500 CEOs are women, despite women making up 50% of the population.
That's Asher Lawson, a graduate student at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. He says that one way to even the playing field might be to change the way we think about and talk about leadership. And he and his colleagues have found that organizations are more likely to describe women using words that are typically associated with achievement if they have female CEOs. Their findings appear in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
Gender inequality has been deemed the greatest human rights challenge of our time by the United Nations. In our research, we're interested in specifically some of the factors that perpetuate these gender inequities, as well as the downstream consequences of those gender stereotypes.
To get at the roots of these stereotypes, Lawson and his team took a closer look at corporate speak and the words businesses use when referring to women.
So we're really interested in language because it gives us this deep insight into how people are thinking about women in a way that doesn't rely on them reporting it themselves.
Now, coming straight out and asking companies how they feel about females can lead to some fanciful forecasting.
So if you ask organizations whether they believe in gender equity or whether they're interested in fairness, because of social desirability concerns, they'll nearly always say yes.
To find out if businesses talk the talk and walk the walk, the researchers parsed the shareholder reports and investor documents of S&P 500 companies. Using natural language processing techniques, they analyzed some 43,000 files, containing more than 1.2 billion words. And they looked for associations between words that signify women, like she and her, and words typically associated with leadership, like assertive or ambitious or effective.
One way to think of it is if we had an autocomplete system, like you use on your phone, and you said, she is, it would be like, how likely is it that the next word is powerful?
Once they assessed the association,
we then asked, how do these associations change when you hire women as leaders? And we saw the same pattern across all of this data, that hiring women as senior leaders led to an increased association with those leadership congruent traits.
And it wasn't that the companies were extolling the virtues of their own specific staff.
So it's not just discussion of those new CEOs and board members, but actually generalizes to discussion of women more broadly. So we were heartened to see this result.
At the same time, they wondered whether there might be any backlash. In other words, when a woman's seen as more competent, is she then considered to be less compassionate or considerate?
Happily, we saw that there was no decreased association with being caring and these kinds of likable traits.
Even better, the data suggests that the organizations that saw the biggest boost in female-linked leadership language are more likely to hire even more women.
So this highlights the opportunity for a virtuous cycle where the effect can snowball. Appointing women leads women to be more closely associated with these traits that are seen as necessary to be leaders, and this can actually precipitate hiring more women in the future. So it's a very exciting process to witness.
And something the head honcho will surely write about in her next annual report. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson announced that every human being has certain unalienable rights, among which are those to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what did Jefferson mean by the pursuit of happiness? Since Jefferson did not invent the phrase, the best we can do is to discover its source and determine what it meant to its originator. Almost surely, Jefferson read about the pursuit of happiness in John Locke's Essay Concerning Human Understanding, 1690, in which he discusses how the human mind operates. As therefore the highest perfection of intellectual nature lies in a careful and constant pursuit of true and solid happiness, so the care of ourselves, that we mistake not imaginary for real happiness, is the necessary foundation of our liberty. The stronger the ties we have to an unalterable pursuit of happiness in general, the more are we free. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
When is a right not a right? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The dictionary defines the word right as, quote, a legal entitlement to have or obtain something. A legal entitlement. For half a century, women in the United States have had the right to control their own bodies, to make their own choice. Now, it seems virtually certain from Samuel Alito's draft opinion in the Dobbs case that 5 members of the Supreme Court, based not on any change in the law, based not on any change in the facts, are going to throw out a half century of precedent and strip women of their right, their liberty, their dignity, and put politicians in charge of their bodies. Can a state force a woman who is raped and becomes pregnant to carry the fetus to term? That's a perfectly fine law, according to the 5 justices. And how about a 12-year-old girl who is the victim of incest? Again, a totally valid exercise of governmental power. And how about a law that requires a woman to carry to term and give birth to a fetus that cannot and will never survive outside the womb? No problem with a law like that, say these justices. The most immediate take-home lesson from Alito's opinion: in the United States today, what you thought was a federal constitutional right is not such a right whenever 5 justices decide to take it away. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day that would become known as the Great Upheaval, or the Great Uprising, which began in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Railroad workers were angry. They had seen their wages cut twice in 6 months by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The workers went on strike, refusing to let the trains move. 600 trains jammed the rail yard, and soon the strike spread to Baltimore. When the Maryland governor called out the National Guard, workers in the city rose up and attacked them. The guardsmen fired on the crowd, killing 10 people. The strike continued to spread to Pittsburgh, Chicago, and East St. Louis. More than 100,000 workers stopped working. This was not an organized strike by a central labor union, but rather a popular revolt by workers fed up with their wages and working conditions. Everywhere the workers went on strike, they were met with armed troops. Workers, police, and guardsmen were at battle. Workers tore up railroad tracks and burnt railroad buildings. The chairman of the Pennsylvania Railroad voiced his opinion that those on strike should be given, quote, a rifle diet for a few days and see how they like that kind of bread. In Chicago, thousands of workers clashed with police in what came to be known as the Battle of Viaduct. In all, more than 100 workers lost their lives across the country. The events of the summer of 1877 were a turning point in U.S. labor history. Industrialists became convinced that they needed an armed response to labor uprisings. The violence of 1877 forewarned the bloody conflict of labor versus capital that would continue over the decades to follow across the United States.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of 93. Well, fancy that. About nearly the same as yesterday, which was, more like 95, 96, but okay. Plentiful sunshine throughout the day with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with the remaining of that supermoon. Lows in the upper 50s, low 60s, winds out of the west-northwest, increasing to 10 to 15 miles per hour. Then sunny skies tomorrow with highs around 92, 93, with winds out of the west-northwest back down to its normal 5 to 10 miles per hour. Our confirmed cases of coronavirus and deceased remain the same, so I'll give you an update as we get on later in the week. It looks like grass pollen is rated high here in the town of Rogue River, and the air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 25 parts per million. And of course, at this time of year, the daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, and you know to take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 75%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 76 degrees and fair. Paris is 88 and sunny. Rome is 88 and fair with, actually they have an advisory for electrical activity in the sky that could impact their electrical grid. Looks like Ukraine is 80 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 75 degrees with rain. Sydney, Australia is 48 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and partly cloudy with their summertime fog advisory. And New York, New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Pope Francis named 3 women to serve as members of the Vatican office that vets bishop nominations, in another first for women to have a say in Catholic Church governance. The dicastery for bishops oversees the work of most of the Church's 5,300 bishops who run dioceses around the world. The dicastery's members, who include cardinals, bishops, and now women, meet periodically to evaluate proposed new bishops whose names are forwarded to Vatican ambassadors. The ambassadors usually come up with 3 candidates for each opening after consulting with local church members. The Pope still makes the final call and can bypass candidates proposed. But the addition of women into the consultation process is nevertheless significant, and a response to calls to break up the all-male clerical hierarchy of the Holy See and demands that women have a greater say in church decision-making. The new members are Sister Raffaella Petrini, who already holds a high-ranking Vatican position. Also named was Sister Yvonne Rengu, a former Superior General of the Daughters of Mary the Helper, as well as a laywoman, Maria Leah Servino, president of the Catholic Women's Umbrella Group, the World Union of Female Catholic Organizations.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rafe Cassert of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The European Union's executive decried the rule of law situation in Poland and Hungary, centering on breaches in their judiciary and media in its annual report. Even though Poland is at the forefront of the EU's efforts to welcome war refugees from Ukraine, it did come in for a lot of criticism regarding its judiciary independence and the media. Hungary, whose Prime Minister Viktor Orban is seen as Russia's best contact in the 27-nation EU, also stood out for the criticism it got. Poland and the EU's headquarters in Brussels have been fighting for years over judicial independence, and the dispute is far from resolved despite recent moves in Warsaw. Poland must still take more steps to ensure judicial independence before it can receive any of the frozen funds totaling about $39 billion U.S. Hungary came in for perhaps even tougher criticism, with a report saying judicial independence concerns remain unaddressed, while it said anti-corruption measures still fell woefully short. It described a nation where risks of clientelism, favoritism, and nepotism in the high-level public administration remain unaddressed. The European Commission has been engaged in a protracted struggle with Hungary's nationalist government in an effort to force it to comply with EU rule of law standards, pointing to deficiencies in judicial independence, crackdowns on the media and civil society organizations, and inadequate safeguards against corruption. The European Commission has launched several proceedings against Hungary for what it says are violations of the EU rules. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.